I'm gonna turn off my face real quick so I can show my screen. But to begin, this isn't possible without Sarah, Eric, and our whole team from Ideas, and also to you guys. So big thanks for attending this. Big thanks for spending your time with us, especially on a weekend. We really appreciate it. And before we get into the Q&A session with Eric and Sarah, I just want to give you guys a brief rundown on who we are as a company. So we're fairly new. We just started about 2 years ago, and we're growing pretty quickly. And the idea is our motto, or our slogan is that we're like a data science, AI, blockchain association. So anything tech related, that's what we are really passionate. A data science hub where everybody can talk, collaborate, change ideas. But as a company, this is us, International Data Engineering and Science Association. And what we offer is a lot of different platforms. So we're mainly known for hosting a lot of conferences throughout the United States. We have 7 this year, and our 2 next upcoming one is going to be in Harvard and also in online webinars, which we just started today. So that's pretty exciting. And we also do our little consulting programs. And this is just a brief rundown on how we grew as a company. So we started in February 2016, and as the years progressed, we hosted our first data science conference at USC. And ever since then, we just decided to partner up with a lot of different organizations throughout the United States. And this just gives us more leverage, more connections. So we really value everybody. And again, this is just some stuff from our conference. We have a lot of keynote speakers that we're associated with. We host a lot of training sessions and also networking mixers. And the topics that our company really focuses on, you can see on the bottom. We focus a lot of stuff on AI, blockchain, data science, machine learning, big data, and all of that good stuff. So some of our speakers, hopefully we can include Sarah and Eric into here. We could probably do it now, but we have a lot of different speakers from different backgrounds throughout the United States. We're happy to have them. And they're from a lot of great companies, as you can see here. We're mainly focused on, or our main sponsors are from IBM, Capital One, and also from USC. And also for demographics, so I'm kind of curious for you guys as well, if you can leave a comment below, if you guys are scholars, young professionals, practitioners, or whatnot. So again, our sponsors, our co-company is Data Application Lab, and Ideas is our nonprofit organization. So that's our main company. IBM, NVIDIA, UT Dallas, those are mainly our go-to sponsors. We have great connections with them. And also for us, we also host a lot of certificates. So if you guys are ever curious to getting certifications with SQL, R, Python, or NLP programs, feel free to let us know. And our direct contact is here, if you can take some notes. And before I begin, I would just like to let you guys know, if you can head over to our website, ideassn.org. You can actually just do a quick subscription real quick. It's free, and we'll update you periodically with our webinars or anything that we have in mind. And with that, let me stop sharing. I would like to pass the baton to Sarah and Eric. They'll present to you guys about some really cool stuff on how to get into the field. So thanks again.
Cool. All right, well, welcome. Thanks for spending time with us. For some of us, it's still Saturday. For some of you, it is very early on Sunday. So thank you for being willing to get up and take some time to listen to what we have to say. And also, we're excited to get to hear some of your questions as we go through the session. I think it'll be good to start with an introduction of who we are. I'm going to let Sarah introduce herself first. I'll follow up, and then we'll dive into some of the topics that we want to focus on today.
Cool. So yeah, thank you guys for coming. So I always wonder how to start this, at the very, very beginning or at the semi-close beginning. Right. What I do want to mention, I mean, I think there's a lot of people who are attending who maybe are just, aspiring to enter the data science field. And so I like to start from the very, very beginning, which starts with me and my passion for cooking. So at some point, I think it's fair to say that my highest aspiration was actually wanting to be a chef. I wanted to be a professional chef. And I mean, through means of kind of realizing that the first classes were going to teach you how to clean things, I was like, wait, I don't want to do that. But I also have a very strong passion for mathematics, and that could potentially lead me somewhere, down another passion that I also really enjoy. So I kind of ended up pursuing that as another means, and that ended up taking me to kind of a detour. So I did end up pursuing math, economics, statistics during my undergrad, and I did take a detour at some point when I kind of figured how can I be most impactful with my skill set. And I thought that would be down the road of kind of nuclear fusion and renewable energy. And so I ended up studying mechanical engineering, and I'm sure a lot of us on this podcast might also have studied engineering and be transitioning into data science. So I think that is a good conversation to have. And once I graduated, I mean, I was I kind of let it all out on the table. I was like, okay, the first job I get, is it going to be in engineering or is it going to be in data analysis? And I was like, okay, toss up. And it ended up being as a data scientist for Oprum. And so I kind of did that for a few years. And now I'm actually working for Mobilityware, which is a gaming company. And kind of, I mean, we could talk more if you guys have questions about kind of what I've done there and kind of the impact that I've had. And I think today our discussion will be really great because it's kind of off of the learnings that I've had and that Eric's had at his time kind of during our career paths that we've kind of sensed are good things to kind of keep in mind as you move along in your career. So hopefully that'll be a fruitful conversation.
Yeah, awesome. What Sarah didn't tell you is I think she's been at her new job for like a week, had a lot of impact already. So that'll be a good part of the conversation today. In terms of where I start my story, I think my story is probably always that I'm interested in teaching and have been a teacher along the way. So that's taken me from initially wanting to be a high school math teacher to studying how students think and learn different mathematical ideas in my master's and PhD program. And then in grad school round 2, I decided it was time, I became really fascinated with working with data, understanding how to deal with it at scale. And that led me to a business analytics program. Now, along the way, I've done a lot of different things between teaching R and Python, experimental design, things like that. I've also, the master's program that I was in really got me ready to think about data at scale. After that program, that it really brought me to where I am now at LinkedIn. At LinkedIn, we do a lot of different things in data science. My specific area of focus is on our LinkedIn Learning product. So we focus on how to scale the learning business. And so no matter what, I think what's interesting is that this thread of me being able to teach, me being interested in how people think and learn has and probably always will continue to drive what my career journey looks like. So I think with that in mind, we could do introductions, but we would prefer to not have a bunch of you fall asleep when it's 5:30 a.m. in India. But I think where we want to start today is we've both taken different paths into this field. I have never been an engineer. I would never claim to have been an engineer. And I think, so Sarah and I bring different perspectives on like what it looks like to enter the field, but we're not only focused today on, you know, getting into the field, but when you get into a job, how do you set yourself up for success? Because your time in this field is probably going to be a long journey, and understanding how you get off the ground in the right way. What do you do in your first 3, 6, or 12 months to set yourself up for success? That's going to be our area of focus today. And I think that's where we'll kick off.
Yeah. So, I don't know if Randy was going to say something.
Oh, no. Thanks for the introduction. But before we begin, I was very curious on Eric's slogan or your headline, like I learn every day. So I was curious what made you write that.
I think I wrote that. I remember I changed it, I think on like day 5 when I was working at LinkedIn, when I felt entirely overwhelmed. I was like, all right, let's turn this from, oh my gosh, I can't handle this flood of information, to something positive. It's like the fact that, and it continues to now. Like the best thing about my job right now is that I am pushed to learn new stuff. And I think we'll get into this discussion, but in data science in particular, because of how fast it changes, because of the way in which data can behave over time, you have to learn so many new things. And so this idea of, you know, learning every day matters a lot. So people have asked me that before. They're like, oh, that seems really profound. I'm like, I was so frustrated when I wrote that. I was overwhelmed. And that's the backstory to it.
Right.
So, like, can I take it? I'm like, sure. I was just upset when I wrote it. So, but now I look at it, it's a very positive thing. And I think it's a useful way to consider what data science is.
All right. So I'm gonna block myself. Keep going. Thanks.
Okay, cool. So, so what we've kind of put together are kind of, so the topic of today is basically how to set yourself up for success, and in my opinion, to make yourself indispensable to a company. And we've kind of outlined 5 things that maybe we can keep in mind and kind of branch off of. So I'll just mention them. So 1, I think it's important to make friends across as many departments as you possibly can. So we'll go into why that's important. The 2nd is to be proactive instead of reactive. 3 is to produce good work. 4, to speak up and lead up. And 5, to teach others. So we can start at the first one. So make friends with as many, across as many departments as you possibly can. So do you want to start with that?
Yeah, let's go from there.
Okay.
I think in having conversations with Sarah getting ready for today, it became pretty obvious that what people mean by networking can vary quite a bit. Right? Some people's image of networking is that they are cold messaging new people and trying to make connections. For others, it's meeting people at meetups or events, conferences, whatever it might be, webinars, right? Like the one we're doing today. So I think that like we want to have a discussion a little bit about what networking means. And I think that's maybe where I want to kick it off with we'll be asking each other some questions along the way, and to kind of dig into these topics. So I'm going to kick it off by asking Sarah, so what do you think, what is networking for you?
Okay, so yeah, I think we uncovered this a little bit earlier. Like the way that I think about networking is, so we kind of uncovered kind of two ways of thinking about it, active and like inactive. So like active would kind of go along the lines of what you were saying is, hey, I really want to get in touch with this person. Let me contact them and set up maybe an informal interview, see how we can mutually benefit from a conversation. The way I tend to think about networking is more of an inactive networking. So besides having, I usually have no goal in mind. It's mostly just doing things, being a part of events and like networking opportunities for things that I just actually enjoy doing. So going to meetups is like one of them. So not only do I host my own meetups where I get to meet and interact with a lot of really cool people, but I also attend as many conferences as I can. And while I'm there, I meet people. And, you know, at the end of the day, the way I see it is that every connection that you make with someone, you don't know what that's going to lead to. And whether you have an idea in mind or a goal, like, hey, I'm trying to get a job in 3 months and I have to meet the right people along the way that are going to help me achieve that, I mean, that's good. The way that I think of inactive networking is to draw this analogy to dating. Like, you don't always find what you're looking for when you're searching, right? It's when you're not searching, but you're doing the things that you enjoy. So if you think of networking in that sense, and you're just doing the things that you enjoy, then you'll probably end up landing on something fruitful without even intending it to be that way. So an example that I can give is kind of the way I got involved with data science office hours. So actually, maybe something that you guys might not know is that, or maybe you do know, that Bo had put up a very public post about him losing his job like a week before the first data science office hours went live. And because of that, I knew at Oprum we were hiring people. So I reached out to him, and like a 30-minute conversation with Bo about his interests, about what he was up to. I told him what I was doing, and that kind of set the stage for me being able to, like, when I reached out to them a week later, Bo was like, hey, I know Sarah, she's cool. Like, maybe we can add her here. So like, that was something that I didn't intend to bring me anything in the future. It was more of just me doing something like in my day-to-day that I thought was important. I was like, hey, this is someone who looks like I should reach out to them and talk to them and have a conversation. And though it did not end up with him working at Oprum, he found another great job. It did lead to something else. And so that's been mutually beneficial. So that's the way that I tend to think about it. What about you?
I think we'll probably have different perspectives, because I think your version of networking probably realistically depends on where you are in your career. So I know a lot of people listening, if you're trying to think about breaking into the field, you have a timeline, right? You have a compressed timeline. And so while there are events that you can go to, things that you can form, it's also good to have a complementary set of contacts and people you can reach out to that are more time sensitive. Those could be people that are hiring managers. Those could be people in companies that you desire to be a part of, whatever it might be. I think a lot about what it means when you see like a hiring manager on LinkedIn who says that they are open to, like, we're hiring. They are very much maybe a warm lead for you to pursue in terms of just contacting, getting your name out there. But certainly I think what Sarah said is important, because if you wait to network until you absolutely need to have people in your network, it's probably too late. Mm-hmm. So this idea of active, more, I'd say active versus passive maybe, for networking, both are very valuable. And you should consider, I mean, every week I try to reach out to 2 or 3 new people, and sometimes nobody responds to me. It's just how it goes. Sometimes people do respond. And one thing I would mention, if you are reaching out to people, certainly via LinkedIn, whatever medium it might be very measured in how you do it. In terms of, there are 3 things that I think you need to do. One is you need to introduce yourself. Introduce yourself very briefly. They don't need an entire resume. They don't need an overview of like what you've done for the past 2 years. They just need to know something about you. You also need to demonstrate why you're reaching out to them. Like, what do you know about them that made you curious about reaching out? And the third thing is close with an ask, right? You're reaching out to them for a purpose. So they are aware of that. And so if it's a referral, if it's a further conversation, if it's 5 minutes of their time to chat on the phone, those are things that you need to ask for. But also understand that by asking for these things, it's very plausible and possible that they're going to say no, or they won't respond. People are really busy, and I think it's useful to think about this as that you're not going to win them all, but you do need to be practicing this regularly, both as active and passive approach to networking.
Yeah, so I want to add on to what he was saying about like sending out emails. I think the most impactful emails are not the ones where you spend time talking about yourself, but spending time talking about what you know about the person that you're reaching out to and make yourself very relevant to them. Like, how does what you have, if you're reaching out to a business and you want to say, how does my skill set align with what you're aiming to accomplish? If it's to a person, it's like, hey, what do you know about them, and what can you guys mutually benefit from, right? So it's not, don't think of reaching out to someone and networking with someone as a one-way, like, I want to take from you, but think about what you can also bring to the table that they could benefit from. So think of it as a two-way street. That's how we think about informal interviews. It's a two-way mutual benefit. And then we've been talking about networking externally, but what the first point was is not only just networking as a whole, but like also within your organization, right? So are you guys able to hear?
Just double checking. All right.
Okay.
All right. We got lots of yeses. We're good.
Okay.
All
right. Within your organization. So which is part of how you make yourself indispensable to your company, right? When you have formed bridges across many different departments, they start to value you more, and you become the point of contact most of the time for people when they feel like you're approachable, when they feel like they can talk to you about things. And so I think it's a great thing to think about, not just outside of the company and who you can network with outside, but definitely inside as well, which I've seen to kind of be very fruitful when you've built very strong bridges with other departments.
Yeah. So I think we're going to shift onto moving past networking, which we could give an hours-long discussion on because it's that important. It's that deep. We're going to shift to the second topic, which, or piece of advice, I should say, is that focus on being proactive rather than reactive. Something that I think is very important is that if you take the time to read most companies' mission statements and what they look for in candidates, they are looking for people who are going to drive things, to take ownership of projects, to move them along. They may not state this outright in a job description, but when you talk with people, when you interview with people, it's really clear that they want people who are going to take initiative. And in terms of my own story on this end, LinkedIn has a number of different operating priorities. One of them is certainly dream big, but there's also this idea of getting stuff done. And I think what's very important to consider about that is these are tied together, right? So we are supposed to be dreaming big, but also getting things done. And that means while you're thinking outside the box, make sure that thinking outside the box is also generating results, that it's generating initiatives within the company, that it is giving visibility to you or your team or whoever it might be in the company. But this idea of being proactive, and that means to us that you're not sitting back just waiting for tasks to be given to you, is extremely important. It's that much more important in data science, in a field that is very new, in a field that is developing all the time. So I'm curious to hear a little bit from Sarah about some story or her experience with why being proactive matters such a great deal.
Okay, so I have probably like several stories, but I think this idea of being, okay, so I mean, even if you think about just a lot of the tasks that we end up getting are mostly reacting to things that we're seeing, right? So it's So like, even if it's that like clients are catching things, or like, hey, well, why is this going on? And it's like, it's a race to kind of beat them to it, you know, like how can we think about, and predict kind of like what's going to satisfy not only our clients, but also internally, keeping as on top of all the data that's coming in, and kind of setting up infrastructure such that we can capture like outliers, for example, before they become a bigger deal than they actually are, or that they possibly could be. So setting up kind of like more infrastructure for that. But in terms of like leadership and stuff like that, so being proactive means kind of like if you have a certain skill set, or you know something, teaching others around you, and being proactive in that sense, or setting up workshops, that's being proactive. Also being proactive in your learning. So when you think about all the, like being swamped and drowning in tasks and data, and then you, let's say, come up with an idea, and you want to implement that idea, and but you're, okay, hold on, let me think about how I want to say this. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is like, because the field is growing at such a pace, knowing and being willing to learn all the time and be on top of what you care to learn and how you care to implement that in your company matters, right? So I think I was approached with this question the other day, like, hey, Sarah, like I'm interested in doing machine learning stuff, but my company like doesn't give me those tasks. Like, how can I incorporate that into my day-to-day? And my advice was, if you think it's useful and they don't see it yet, then spend the time to do it anyways. If you have the time, like use your spare time if that's something that you enjoy and this is a career path that you do want to take, that you want to see through, right? So do it anyways, but be sure that when you're spending the time to do that, that it is something that you're going to be able to support and convince people that it's useful. And if you do that the first time around, they're more likely to support your projects down the line. So,
yeah, something I want to emphasize is that the advice that we're giving today is not just something that starts when you walk into your first job, right? Typically the reason that we look for things that we're mentioning today in an interview is that the habits that you've developed over time and that you show in your work prior to a job are most likely to be those that you carry with you on day one. So this idea of being proactive instead of reactive can also translate to interviews. I have done a lot of interviews in my life, both on being the interviewee and also the interviewer. The interviews that I remember most and me doing the interview are the ones where the candidate came in and they knew the company well enough that they had ideas for what could be done. They had ideas for innovation. They had ideas for something that would be transformative to the business. In some cases, we were already doing those things internally, but there's no possible way they could have known that. In other cases, they're clearly generating ideas, and it's and as an interviewer, you remember that. You remember that this person took the time, took the initiative to know enough about your company and the work that they want to do, that they could suggest a path forward, and that stands out. And that doesn't just stands out during the interview, but it also stands out as you get into a company. Being proactive is hard. Like I have days where I get so busy and it's easy to get overwhelmed by all of the different tasks you have to keep up with. So that being proactive requires like real mental practice. Like you have to put it, honestly, it sounds weird, but put things in your calendar that you want to do as a reminder, right? Like take some time to set aside and step back from the tasks that you're doing day to day and ask yourself, what are the big things that could really be game changers rather than just maybe the day-to-day work that you're doing?
Yeah. So. I think like along those lines are kind of what you'll tend to hear is like, you know, you know and understand the libraries and the tools, that's great. If you can do things, that's great. But making impact and really being able to think about a problem differently than others, which is why diversity is also really important on teams, diversity of thought. That's where all the great ideas come from. And then being able to execute on them in a way that's meaningful could be very good. So I think we covered everything there.
All right.
Cool.
Sounds good.
So the third one is to produce good work. So we'll go into kind of like a few layers on this, on what it means to produce good work. So first thing under that is mastering the data. So Eric, what does it mean to master the data?
I knew you were going to toss this question to me. So I think everyone who's probably listening to this, or anyone in data science, would probably shake their head and agree when you first start, whether it's a project, whether it's in a new company, whatever it might be, understanding what data is there, how to get to it, when you can get to it, how good the data is. All of these questions are extremely important, but they take time. So I remember at LinkedIn, it's probably no surprise to you that we sit on top of a lot of data, right? We generate a lot, we capture a lot. We have a huge data ecosystem, but it takes a long time to understand where we store different things, why we should trust certain sources over others. Knowing where the data lives takes a long time. And this is something that when you go into a company or you're job searching and you're interviewing, things like this, you want to make sure that you ask questions about how do you help data scientists get up to speed on where the data is. Because that's so key to getting off to the right start or off on the right foot with a company or project, is knowing where the data sits. That is certainly connected, and so knowing where it sits is important, but also knowing whether it's good or not is also important, right? If you know where all the low quality data sits, that hasn't really done anything for you as a data scientist, other than you know how to access bad data, and so your results are also not going to be great. So these experiences in different companies have led me to say, you really need to ask these questions during the process of assessing whether the company is a good fit for you, because it's their job to set you up for success, but it's your job to also assess whether you think they can do that for you.
Yeah. So what I'm going to say to this is, if like a large part of you like mastering the data and knowing where it lives and understanding kind of what lives in there is kind of tied into your onboarding process, right? So some companies are going to have a very good plan of how they're going to onboard you and kind of tell you where all the data is, what's in all the data sources, how they're connected, and kind of set you up. I mean, it doesn't change the fact that it might be super messy, but at least they'll kind of lead you to that. While other companies might not have a very good plan. They might not even have a good onboarding process. They'll just kind of throw you in the deep end and expect you to kind of figure it out on your own, depending on how they have it set up. So what I can say is that that kind of like my experience with mobility, where like has been really great. Like they know where all the data sources are. They've kind of onboarded me very well. And so it's been a nice, easy transition for me. I'm drowning in data, but at least I have a starting point to access everything. And on the lines of kind of knowing and understanding the quality and structure is like, depending on how like set up the company is with their data architecture, you may have a hand in kind of how that gets implemented, especially if there's no PM yet. So that's kind of what we went through at Oprum. Like I was the second data scientist that got onboarded there, and it was kind of a struggle. Like, and you're working with engineers, and engineers are stubborn, and so
I wouldn't know anything about that one.
But like kind of asking for what you need because you're the one working closest with the data. So whether that's like setting up new tables or databases, it's a matter of kind of starting that conversation and really understanding what lives there and doing some thorough, quality assurance on what data is there, because everything you build off of that data is going to kind of, it's going to need to be accurate. So that's important to think of. What else is important under producing good work?
So in terms of producing good work, we mentioned we have two major points. So the first one, which we just discussed, is mastering the data, and that can take a long time. Along with producing good work is also setting the right expectations. And part of this is helping the people around you, your manager, define what good work means. And in some companies, they're going to have a very good idea what good work means, right? They have a mature data science organization. They've seen a lot of different people work, produce results, so they know what good is. And they are going to judge you perhaps relative to that standard that they've already set, which is fine. But there are many more companies that do not or have not really defined what good means. That's typically in smaller companies where they are just getting started on their data science journey and they don't quite know what counts as quality. So think about what you do when you don't know something, right? They look at what other people have done. So some companies look toward the Googles and the Facebooks of the world and they say, well, this is what good data science is. Well, we know that's probably unrealistic for a small company. Others will just look toward their peers and say, this is what good data science is. But really what I'm trying to emphasize here is that there's not a standard definition for what good means. And so you need to push and establish that yourself. And that means being realistic about what is possible, about what you can achieve. Data science, artificial intelligence, whatever it might be, has so much hype attached to it right now that people read about these amazing results and they think, oh, well, my company clearly needs that. We all know how difficult it is to replicate and create magic with data. And that's something that you need to start with on day one, is saying, okay, maybe this project is plausible. Maybe what you're saying is plausible, but realize that it takes a lot of time. Realize that this project that you're proposing that you would love to have next month is probably more like a 6 to 12 month project, given the data foundations and issues that we have. It's so important. Like in every project that I get started on, I try to set these expectations for what the final deliverables are going to be. Make sure that everyone's on the same page, because if you don't set expectations up front, you're setting yourself up to have a lot of issues. And I think Sarah probably has a lot of stories that go along these lines as well.
Well, no, so what I want to add to that is that, sometimes, like, okay, I'm going to say like a lot of the companies that are looking to hire data scientists right now probably don't even know what data scientists are supposed to do, right? So they'll put out the most generic job postings of like, oh, I think they're supposed to do this and I think they're supposed to do that, and all just combining like a bunch of different data titles, but all into this thing called a data scientist that's supposed to magically know everything. And realistically, obviously we know this, that we can't do all of that, right? So a part of kind of doing well at your job is setting the expectations with the person who's hiring you, right? Like, hey, as a data scientist, I'm not also going to be setting up the infrastructure of all the tables. Like that's probably for a PM to do, and engineers. And then, so I need to be responsible and kind of set the scope of what you are capable of doing and what you're not capable of doing, and in what time span, right? If they're looking to have things done in a they want, the entire pipeline built out, and for you to be doing running analyses by a couple months out, you have to tell them like, hey, that's not realistic. Maybe you should look into, let's start talking about a hiring plan. Like if I'm the first data scientist that you want to hire on the team, like how do you plan to grow the team? Like start asking those questions of, what do you think that that I'll be doing in my role, and how do you plan to grow the team to help support the things that you want to accomplish, right? So, and also like, I'm thinking about my first week, like in terms of setting expectations, I want to do a lot to impress them. I want to make sure that they're seeing my value on the team, but also setting expectations on how long things will take me to get done, while still maintaining everyone's happiness. And I think, yeah, we were talking about kind of, it starts at the interview process, right? So when we're talking about kind of setting expectations for that, but also I think discussions that we've had have kind of been surrounding this idea of how difficult it is nowadays to hire. And it's sometimes because even as companies are starting to think about data scientists, not only are they like kind of missing the mark, but even people who are in data science, who are writing up data science descriptions, they're focusing a lot on maybe like more on, hey, do you know this tool? Do you know this library? And less on the fact that they can critically think. And so I think this is an important thing to talk about. Like when you're thinking about entering, like when you're even like, if you're on a data science team and you're thinking about people that you want to add to your team, do you care that they know a library very well? Or do you care that they can be innovative and that they can think critically and that they can be creative? So at the end of the day, I mean, if they can do all of those things, it's possibly that they can pick up another library, because picking up libraries nowadays and new tools are probably the easiest thing you'll do. But knowing how to be innovative and creative is actually a little more challenging. So, yeah.
Cool. Sometimes someone states things well enough that you're just like, I can't add much to that. So I think I want to keep things moving along. I know some of you are hanging on by a thread. Either it's very late for you, or the coffee is maybe, I'll see how effective it's still being. So I think what I would like to jump into next is a focus on being a leader. And so I know that there are a lot of questions where people ask about the skill set for a data scientist. Like, what does it mean to develop the right skills? And it might seem like in the conversations that we're having right now that we're not talking about skills, but we are. A skill set is much broader than the set of libraries that you know or the languages that you learn. In fact, most people, I think, would probably argue, who are in data science positions, that the libraries and the languages and the ways in which we call them and code, those things change a lot. They perhaps change more than anything else. What remains fundamental in terms of skill sets are your ability to communicate, your ability to be innovative, your ability to work well with other people. And so we're not avoiding the focus on skill set. It's that what we're highlighting is that how people usually discuss skill sets is somewhat narrow. And we're trying to expand that view of what it means to have data science skills. In that respect, our fourth point is to answer and say about the importance of leadership. So, and when you typically say leadership to people, they'll probably say, oh yeah, you have a team, or you have this many people that you run and that you are responsible for meetings and deliverables. But leadership is much broader than that. If you look up a definition of leadership, it's not going to say you have this many people that you are responsible for. It's going to be a lot of ways about how you carry responsibility as an individual. And that responsibility as an individual doesn't necessarily need to come in the form of being in charge of 10 other people. It can be in the form of pushing innovative ideas. It can be in the form of driving a new initiative for a company. It can be changing or suggesting how to change the hiring process so you actually get the right people that you want. All of these things are really, really important. And So what I want to push everybody who's listening and who watches this later to think about is leadership is much more than who you're responsible for. It's more about what you're responsible for in the company and how much you are able to drive change from that perspective. That's something, like, I'm not even going to start on some of the stories because they're all over the place, but people notice people who step up, people who are able to push and say, this is how we should be doing things, and this is why. Not just, this is what I believe. So if you don't have evidence for it, trust me, it will not go well for you. But I think that's an important conversation starter, and I'm going to let Sarah pick it up from there.
Yeah, good point. What I want to kind of like add on to that is like, so yeah, we care, people notice, to definitely notice when you're able to come up with innovative ideas and kind of communicate that across the company, and kind of this kind of ties into a lot of our other points. Something that I kind of want to add, maybe that we didn't get to say, is that, which is something that I've kind of done, is incorporating things outside of work that also help me be innovative inside of work. So something that I noticed is when our company was going towards machine learning, and we kind of wanted to incorporate that a little more, and it was kind of more of a newer thing to me, I took the initiative to start monthly meetups. And I did that as a way to kind of work on my public speaking skills, to work on my technical skills, to network. It kind of was like an all-encompassing thing that I could do that could help me translate all of those things, right? Public speaking and communication is also something that maybe we're not explicitly saying, but is an important skill to have as a data scientist, because not only are you communicating within your team, which is really important, but across department and to clients. And so really being able to communicate your thoughts. And if you ever had an idea and want to kind of pitch that to anyone, you're going to need to know how to convince them into kind of what you're thinking and why it's relevant and why it's going to make an impact. So yeah, that's what I have to say about leadership. I think our last point is one that we've kind of been saying a lot on, I think, our posts. I think a lot of people can agree. It's the idea of teaching others, which I think is kind of one of the most crucial things to have as someone who's in the field, especially. I think if you want to be an expert in any field, I think teaching is super important. Not only are you helping people, but you're also reinforcing your own learning, which is something that I've just been a huge, and I know you as well, have been a huge advocate of from day one. So leading trainings in your organization if it's needed. So I definitely saw there was a need for it within my own company, and not only trainings within your own department, but cross department. So putting on workshops and training people within the company to kind of, because as you increase the collective skill set of everyone, we're all more efficient and we're all producing better. So so taking the initiative to kind of do that is really something that will help make you successful.
Yeah, and teaching others, I think when you say teaching, people often have this image of this person up in front of a classroom and that you're delivering content to somebody else, but teaching is much broader than that, right? From when you are very, very young, like, people are teaching you about how to do certain things. And often that's in like a one-on-one setting. It's often indirect. Sometimes people, like, you teach by example, like how good is the code that you produce? How do you carry yourself in a tough conversation with leadership? How do you make sense of something that's new, completely new to you? So teaching is much broader than just being able to teach someone else and say, hey, this is how you code in this area. This is how you write in this particular library or this particular language. So as you think about teaching, try to broaden your scope of what teaching means. Try to broaden your scope of what it means. It could be as simple as teaching the person next to you something that they are curious about. And often that is probably more valuable than anything you could imagine, because you start building up your reputation for helping others and being a teacher by helping people around you first, very often. You gain that reputation, and then people start asking you to do bigger things. They ask you to run larger trainings, to do meetups, to give a talk. It's really a momentum. You generate momentum by starting small with teaching, and it really does pick up from that point. So I think we are at a point where we've sort of gone through our list of 5, just to recap. And I'm sure Randy will share something with a very pretty graphic that goes with it, because I'm always impressed by his stuff. But I mean, our real areas of focus, right? Making friends and connections across as many departments as you possibly can. Being proactive, and being proactive every day instead of reactive matters. Producing quality work, which entails mastering the data and setting the right expectations. Making sure that you speak up and you focus on leadership matters a lot. Speak up, lead up is the way we'll position that. And the last one is teaching others. So those 5 things. And I think it's important to note that we're not intending to be exhaustive in our list, right? If we really wanted to make a list of things that you need to be successful, it would probably be 99, and then we would start making lists of like 200 things you need to know. But we're not trying to do that. We don't want to make the people who are in India stay on here for 24 hours, because that's not going to be enjoyable for anybody. So with that, I think, Randy, turn it over to you for a second. I don't know what how you want to take it from here. You're muted, Randy, just as a heads up.
Okay, sorry. I just want to say thanks again. You guys brought a lot of insightful ideas, and I have a lot to say. I agree with everything you guys said. And again, back to the audience and to you guys as well. Something that I really valued from the talk that always popped up in my mind was, I totally agree with the value of networking and being proactive, because in life, whether you're like finding a new job or trying to learn a new skill or like do a new hobby, you have to explore the unknown, because if you haven't tried it, you may never know if you will like it or not. And again, back to the proactivity, you can't just wait for things to come at you, because it's never going to happen if you think about it. You have to react or be proactive and go for every opportunity that you see. So that's something I agree with. And back to the networking, Sarah made a really good point on like opportunities, because there was a quote that I really liked. It's that everybody that you meet knows something that you don't, which I totally agree, whether that's something that they've been through in life, or that's something that they've been through in work, or a new skill. There's always something to learn from people, which I really value what the LinkedIn platform provides. And also just the community of data science and like the meetups. You get to learn a lot from a lot of different cool people. And the last thing I would like to also re-emphasize was the value of teaching. So I'm also a TA for Sarah, and she teaches really well. So I get inspired by that too. So I like that. I do agree that the best way to teach, the best way to learn is to teach, because it just reinforces what you already know. So it just embeds in your mind what you're knowing. And that's just what I want to say. But back to the audience, I know they have a lot of questions, so I did pick a few that if you guys can answer.
Okay, sure.
So from Vanita, she said, as a starter into the field, what are the common skills or programs you suggest?
So this question, I'm going to give a short answer, because there's many versions of this, all of which could be very long.
Yeah.
But I think about, and I'm going to give my perspective from LinkedIn, because I think it's a useful way to think about the knowledge base that we expect for data scientists. One is, can you manipulate data? So whether that's in SQL, Python, R, Hive, Spark, I don't care. But this idea of being able to do things creatively with data matters. A knowledge of statistics, and that doesn't mean you have to know everything, but it means you need to know the fundamentals of different tests, different assumptions that you use in modeling. Statistics is at the core of so much of what we do. It can be easy to forget that when machine learning becomes automated in a lot of ways. but we still rely on many statistical assumptions. We focus a lot on being able to think through problems using algorithms. Algorithms can be very simple. They can also be very complex and elegant. But this idea that we solve different problems using a variety of approaches, thinking systematically through a problem and trying to do it efficiently. That's what algorithms are all about, right? Efficient ways of problem solving. And I think the last piece ties in with what we said here, right? Are you able to communicate? Can you translate things about data into a meaningful story? That's maybe one of the more difficult skills to develop because it's not as easy to measure. Just say, okay, I got better at storytelling. Well, that's very difficult to quantify. But those are the core sets of skills that I think, and that can look different across companies. Some of them might care about one language over another, but I think you're going to find that across data science.
I don't have much to add to that just because I think he covered everything, but I will emphasize the fact that even if you know all the tools, it doesn't mean that you're going to be successful. So knowing SQL, knowing Python, knowing R, knowing Tableau, like having a bunch of tools under your tool belt or in your tool set is important. You want to be able to reach into your toolkit and find a tool, like find things that you know how to do. But I think more importantly is once you've done something, once you've run an analysis, or once you've developed a visualization, or once you developed some reporting dashboard, like, is it meaningful? Like, is what you've done meaningful? And does it translate to your audience? Right? So having that skill, like Eric was saying, is like, it's almost harder to develop that than it is to actually pick up a new tool. Yeah, it's challenging to learn Python if you've never coded before. Or yeah, it's hard to learn SQL if you don't understand the syntax, or just acclimating to any new language is going to be difficult. But also treating the storytelling as something that you need to think about and develop is super important. So not just saying, hey, I know these base skill set, these base tools, and that's what I need to be successful. I think I want to say that that's like the right and the wrong approach. The right approach, because you want to have some baseline, right? You want to have some baseline knowledge, but the wrong approach to think that it ends there, right? So like we were saying all the talk is like, you're going to be constantly learning new things all the time. You may think you know everything and then go into a job and find out they're using some new tool that you've never worked with and have to kind of adjust to that. Or even as new tools come out, you're going to have to be able to know how to just pick it up, you know? So having that ability is just as important as knowing the tools themselves.
Totally agree. But yeah, there's another question too, very similar, but I think it's worth mentioning. So I would like to rephrase it, but this is from Ian. He said, what are the everyday habits an aspiring data scientist should have? So by that, I just want to add in, by every day, I would also, maybe you can include maybe everyday habits we should all utilize in our life, not just in data science. That's my answer to that, if you can answer it.
Yeah, I think, well, one is that some of the habits, I mean, you could read a lot of the list that we just mentioned to you as habits, right? Habits that you're trying to develop over time. And those habits are not just developed in a single day. There are very small things you can look at each day, right? There's not every day that you're going to get to focus on leadership. It's probably not every day you're going to get to focus on teaching others. So I think it's worth taking a more holistic view in that you assess, and I don't know if you can do this every day. I think it's challenging, but you look back, like every week at least, try to look back at what you did, look back at the meetings you were in, look back at the projects you worked on, sort of just gauge, like, did you make progress on developing these type of habits? So I don't know if it's an everyday thing, but I do know that if you look back and consistently look back on your progress, you're much more likely to be attuned to what you need to do to make it happen going forward. So at the end of each week or the beginning of each week, whatever you prefer, take some time to assess where you are, what you need to develop, and think about how is that week going to contribute to your development, and be pretty honest with yourself. It's easy to let a week go by and you really, all you did was you worked on a lot of the stuff that you just had to get done, and that's okay. But sometimes it can be 5 or 10 minutes in a day that can help you make progress. It doesn't have to be something that you're doing 2 hours every single day. Mm-hmm. That's one way I think about like developing everyday habits.
Cool. I'll take a stab. So I think the most important daily habit to have is to start the day on a positive note. Like, actually,
I agree.
If you dread going to work, probably shouldn't be working there. If you're not happy with the work that you're doing, with the people that you're surrounded with, then you either need to like rethink yourself, like, hey, is this where I want to continue working? Or do I need to make a switch and so that I can actually get up in the morning and start on a positive note, right? So that's the most important and probably the one daily habit that you should have, right? And so on a more broad basis, I think aiming to learn new things, not only just within the technical scope of data science, but also outside of data science, right? So pick up books that are a little bit out of this domain to kind of learn about, because you end up being more holistic that way. So I would encourage learning something new as frequently as you are able to, and also to push yourself to try new things. So aside from learning, maybe communication is a weakness for you. So I would try getting yourself involved in things where you're actually having to actively communicate with people more. So push yourself into new domains or into new things that you're less comfortable with in order to push yourself to grow, because that's the only way you'll grow is when you push yourself. And then find something that you can do consistently. So probably learning new things and putting yourself in situations where you're trying and doing new things might be less frequent, but find something that you can actually do on a consistent basis every day. So whether that's working on a weakness of yours or whether that's just doing something that you really enjoy, I think this is super important. So even if that's like you were saying, 5 to 10 minutes a day to do something on a consistent basis is super important. So something that I'll try and do is listen to a podcast for 5 to 10 minutes a day, or read for 5 to 10 minutes a day. I think I can say I'm relatively good at listening to a podcast on my morning drive. So I do that on a consistent basis. And that helps me kind of retain and kind of learn new things and kind of accomplish a lot of the things on my list. So that's my advice.
All right. And we only have time for one more question. So wow, we have a lot of people still. So thanks again for staying with us. We're going to end it soon, but I have really one last question that I think is pretty important, because many of our audience is, again, like aspiring data scientists. They want to get into the field. They're really lost. And I think the most important way to actually expose yourself and to like get yourself out there to like make artifacts. So this is the question that I want you guys to answer. She said from Suyash, as a freshman in data science, what type of projects should we do? And to add to that, I would like to say these are things that we all should be doing. You have to create something that's tangible that can be seen within the public so they know that you've done something. So that was just something I wanted to add in. And if you guys can answer that. Last question.
I'm going to let Sarah go first.
So the question is, what projects should you do as you're setting yourself up for a career in data science?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think there's a right answer to this. I think that there's definitely like Kaggle competitions that you can do that are a good first paths into it. So if you're just getting into machine learning, I mean, definitely doing the hello world of machine learning and making sure that you at least understand the fundamentals. But I think in terms of projects, there's, I guess, two ways to approach this. It's either what industry am I trying to get into and how can I set myself up with projects to get myself more aligned with that industry, to make myself more, what do they call it? Shiny, more valuable to them, because now I have skill sets that directly align with that industry. Or the other way around is, so you either start with the industry first or you start with yourself first. So what things are you interested in that you want to spend time on that can eventually get you somewhere, right? So it opens up doors for you naturally. Say you're interested in natural language processing, then it doesn't matter what domain that goes into, but maybe you just pursue that as a project and you do several projects with that, and then that ends up leading you somewhere. So I would take two different approaches and ask yourself, is it with me first? Do I want to start with me first, or do I want to start with my end goal first? What do you think?
The reason that I asked Sarah to go first is because, one, I was thinking and I needed more time. And then two, I think it's, I'm going to say something that I think people may not be super comfortable with. And the fact that your projects that you do are not necessarily going to make or break how an employer looks at you. They just won't. Mm-hmm. What will happen is that the projects that you do better create and develop your own skill set. So if you start from the perspective of what do employers want to see, I think you're going down the wrong path. The right path, in my opinion, is pick a project that is going to push you to develop skills that you need. Honestly, the number of times that I looked at somebody's resume and clicked through to a GitHub profile is like the click rate that you see for a really bad marketing campaign. Like I first need to know that this person has the right skill set. It's later in the process that I'll do things like dig into their GitHub, understand what they're doing. But at the end of the day, the projects that you choose should be for your personal development. They should not be necessarily, like, it's good to build up a portfolio, but that portfolio should have served you in a very productive way, as much as it should be for any company out there. And if a company really wants you to do a project, then they should ask you, right? That a lot of times in the interview process, like take home assignments, things like that are going to be more directly relevant for the company. So as you think about projects, make sure that you're doing them for yourself. And then it's a side benefit if they're also useful for the company. So that's, I think that's it. So I think we'll wrap it.
Yeah, thank you.
So,
and again, thanks to all of you guys that attended. Again, we're trying to do this for ideas. We're going to plan on doing this maybe twice a month, so every 2 weeks. And this is our first one, so celebrate. Thanks again to Sarah and Eric.
All right.
We're actually attending our first webinar. But again, this is a series that we're trying to do for ideas. We just want to just get to know all the data scientists or just the community better, and then just share what we have as a platform. Because again, it's a learning experience. We get to learn from each and every one of us. And since we're here, take the time to network with us on LinkedIn, talk to us. We'll be more than happy to talk back. Don't be shy. And again, thanks to everybody.
All right.
And then looking forward to you guys. Yeah, no problem.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Are we going to end it here?
All right.
Bye, you guys. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming.
Bye.